Yeah, so I'm Chris Collins. I was recently offered to be the horticulture director of Vegetableseeds.net. I'm going to go through my history a bit. I'll just quickly mention this slide because it looks pretty mundane back garden. It's actually half of my back garden and it's important, but I'm not going to tell you now. We'll come to the reason why a little bit later. Now, we're going to talk about vegetables, so you're probably wondering why I'm stood next to a tree. Well, the tree's very important to me. I just wanted to use this as a backdrop for who I am and why Ben's and Camilla have engaged me in Vegetableseeds.net. I have a strong horticultural background. I originally apprenticed with Brighton Parks back in the days when apprenticeships were really apprenticeships and you did 4 years and you worked with old boys who had been in their job for 40 years, and I never appreciated how much knowledge they gave me and passed on to me until I was much later down my career. I put this plant up because this is a Cornish elm and this was the first tree I ever planted 2 weeks into my apprenticeship. When I planted it, it was literally no higher than this. And you can see one of the wonders of working with plants is when you can 25 years later, come back and see the fruit of your work. I actually sat in this tree and did a piece to camera for the BBC when I first started doing telly. So horticulture has all these magical stories. It really does. It's an enchanting subject. Those of you who are sold on it, I don't need to tell. It really can absorb you and take you in. After finishing the parks, I then went to Edinburgh Botanics. It was a fantastic 3 years working with some of the finest horticultural minds. Then I had a bit of travel out of it. I was in Africa for a while, which we'll touch on. I spent time running around in rainforest. I then went to Tokyo for 5 years. I came back here. I was at Kew for a while. Then I ended up as head gardener at Westminster Abbey. So it's quite diverse. About 10 years ago, I was offered a series on BBC Two called The Plantsman, which I did, and that kind of opened the media door. I then I got onto Blue Peter about 2 years later, and I'm, for all intents and purposes, still there, although they did dig the garden up a few months ago, and so I'm a bit gardenless at the moment, so that might be a contradiction. But we'll start off this journey. I think this is the best way to go about it, is when I became interested in food, as the subject of food within horticulture. As you know, this is a big subject now, a really phenomenal subject. This is a fairly recent thing that's become trendy. I grew up as an amenity and a botanical horticulturalist. It's only the last 5 years we've seen this explosion, and it's for the benefit of us all, certainly, of grow your own. If you said grow your own 20 years ago, you're probably doing something illegal. You know, that's how times change. But I became interested in it when I went out to work in Cameroon in Western Africa. And this is a place called Limbe, which is on the Atlantic coast. It contains a very important botanic garden there called the Limbe Botanic Garden, and also a very, very important piece of rainforest on Mount Cameroon. I bring this up only for the reason that this is where I became interested in foodstuffs and growing food. To give you an idea of how different the world is in this environment, this is Limbe's Oxford Street. So you can see we're in a completely different part of the world, where basically, if you don't know how to grow food, you don't live. 90% of the population there are subsistence farmers, and this is a crop called plantain, which when I do this talk in schools, most kids will call it banana, but it is obviously musa, the same genus, but it makes up 60% of the Cameroonian diet. It's absolutely fundamental to them. So I begin to understand now from working in Africa the importance of our ability to dig the soil and grow food. Yeah, and how fundamental it is. We take it for granted in this country because we're so consumer based and we can afford to import things from all over the world, but actually in Cameroon, if you can't grow food, you're not going to live. And who knows when we might end up back in that situation. You just don't. So another very important part of the Botanic Gardens, I noticed with interest when Tony was talking about F1s, and they're very important if you're commercially growing or even if you're growing on an allotment. There is one danger with them, and that is if all sweet corn is F1, if one mildew decides to attack it all, then you could get into a lot of difficulty. So what you need is what you call a genetic stock. This is in a jungle village in Limbe Botanic Garden. I have musa here and I have fig as well. And these are genetic collections. So if we need variables on our food crops, on our F1s, at least we've got a source of wild. And you know in nature when crossbreeds or interbreeds, you get stronger. Diversity is the key to life, basically. So this is basically what Botanic Gardens do, is they are genetic databases, genetic living libraries. So that's part of the work. And I think that's quite important in the subject of food. Now this is a pawpaw. Every house in the UK, in Africa, in Cameroon, has a pawpaw outside, and they're massive, great things like this, and they're delicious fruit. And I always kind of imagined when I was there, imagine if we went back to the UK and everybody had a fruit tree outside their house. You know, this kind of whole idea about coming out in the morning and grabbing a piece of fruit off the tree and having that for breakfast. What a wonderful thing that is. And I remember not really even interpreting that till I was in Africa and how important that was. Now, I like to show this slide because this tree is called a sebia. And it's a big, big tree, and it's at the front of the gardens. And always I find when I talk to people about growing veg, they misinterpret that it's actually quite a lot of labour involved in it. You know, you don't just turn up and stuff grows out of the grounds. You know, there's a lot of misconception. This man is actually taking down this tree. It took him 7 weeks with a machete. So this man is proper fit and proper, you know, he's doing a hefty job. And I always like to say that anything you do landscape-wise or growing or anything involves a physicality, involves, you know, actually getting your hands dirty, getting in and getting those muscles. Or just think of it like it's the best green gym in the world. You don't need to spend 80 quid going down to Virgin Gym, right, to run on a cycle on a bike that isn't going anywhere. Get out and do some gardening. It's a much better way to do it. Now, we're going to go completely somewhere different now. I've finished in Africa. I'm now, literally 3 weeks later, I go from a world completely dominated by nature and I turn up in Tokyo. It's a city of 25 million people, one of the biggest in the world, and they're all in a rush, and everything is humanised and electronic and modern. I don't know if you've seen the film Blade Runner, but that's kind of what reminded me of it. So now I'm in a situation where I think nature's been rolled back to the very edge. You know, where's the role of plants and gardening in this? Where does it fit into the human psyche? Well, it also happens to reoccur that where the relevance of this talk is I was put in a Mitsukoshi department store, which is like the Harrods of Japan. It was a brand new development. It was, you know, the biggest land build in Tokyo for 35 years. And they put me in a shop, and I'm saying, well, I'm a gardener. Why am I in this is ridiculous. I'm in a shop. So I had to almost create the job, if you like. The theme is the Barracuda English garden. So it's about selling British horticulture as a concept. So I began setting about it. This is my introduction to retail, and I imported seeds, and I imported trellis, and I imported pots. I then did a lot of lectures. I did them for an interpreter, and I also used to do design. I used to sit on the board in the shop, and so I built predominantly roof and balcony gardens because there's no open space in Tokyo. What's important about this is if I come back to the UK, and I go to the supermarket where we all use, where it's so convenient, and I go into that supermarket and I see there's a delicatessen, and behind that delicatessen is a trained man in that subject. If I see a butcher inside the supermarket, behind that counter there's someone trained in the art of that. If I go into the bakery, there's a man in there and he's trained to be a baker. The horticulture is just slopped at the front of the shop, isn't it? Your cactus is next to your cut flower, your pot, so there's no thought or arrangement to it. There's no one in there as skilled at this subject. Surely for a subject this important, it deserves its own counter with its own skilled person behind it. So when you grow and you're growing vegetables and allotments and you go out and do your shopping, there should be someone you should be able to engage in that shop with who knows what they're talking about. That's how important the subject is. If you took away horticulture, no street trees or parks or I can go on and on, we'd be living in a very sad world. So it needs more emphasis and commercial emphasis. So in a way, my dream maybe at Vegetableseeds.net is we recreate this online, online, and we offer all those things. We offer good products, we offer good seed, and we offer expertise. Right, then we go, just a quick couple here before we get onto the businesses. This is actually one of my balcony gardens. This is 9 stories up on the side of a building in Tokyo. And everything in this garden is containered. I'm going to come back to container gardening later and how I go about it. But I just think you've got to be amazed by the fact that how resilient plants is. I'm in the middle of one of the biggest cities in the world. I'm 9 floors up and I can still create an English country garden. And in there I'd also grow food. I'd have kiwis, I'd have yam, tommies. You can get a lot of herbs. And what I used to do is used to move it around. I still do a lot of container gardening now. We'll come on to it later. But I love the idea of being able to flex my garden about, to be able to move it about. Okay, and I just wanted to mention this young lady. She's 104, so she's going well. And I mentioned this one because basically this woman is right in the centre of Tokyo, and she grew roses. She was roses mad. And so basically after the war, all of Tokyo must have sprung up. All around her is massive great buildings and 21st century, and this little old woman is still in this little patch of ground growing roses where she'd been since she was a little girl. Quite an amazing story. And what I love about it as you went there is the actual communication, the way horticulture bonds people together, the way it's an adhesive. You know, we speak different languages in different countries, but we understood the subject of gardening and horticulture and plants, and that connects us together. Very, very quite powerful. And of course, I've gone through Tokyo. I had to mention food at least once. This is your paddy fields. You know, your Vindaloo on a Saturday night goes nowhere without these, and obviously most of Japan, in fact Southeast Asia, grows rice. And it's a fantastic, fascinating crop when you see them, because actually it's grown all in water, so you see them in the paddy fields with the old traditional ploughs barefoot, you know, and with the big hats on. It's quite fantastic.